The Galactic Council stood in their ivory towers, looking down upon the latest addition to their grand empire, Earth. They had done this 1,000 times before. A primitive species stumbles into the vastness of space, barely out of their own solar system, and the Council extends a hand. Not in friendship, not in unity, but in dominion. The message was always the same, a decree, not a request. You are now under the protection of the Galactic Council. In exchange, a tribute will be paid. Resources, technology, soldiers. Refusal is not an option. For most species, this was the moment they bowed. Some hesitated, some resisted. But in the end, they always fell in line. The Council was an empire, and empires did not tolerate defiance. But then came humanity. The message had been sent. A delegation of the Council's finest awaited Earth's response in the Grand Hall of the High Chancellor, a massive structure floating above the capital world of Envisi Prime. It was a spectacle, a stage for Earth to kneel, as all others had before. Instead, a single representative arrived, not an ambassador, not a diplomat, a soldier. He stepped forward in a uniform unfamiliar to the Council, but it bore the scars of battle. His face was lined with experience, his eyes unwavering. A veteran, a warrior. He carried no ceremonial gift, no formal petition for mercy, only a data drive. The High Chancellor sneered. You come empty-handed? Have your people no respect for the order of the galaxy? The human smiled, but there was no warmth in it. He placed the data drive on the Council's great table, pushing it forward as if it contained the fate of the stars themselves. We brought our tribute, he said. I suggest you watch it. The Council members, ever confident in their superiority, indulged the human's request. The holoprojectors flickered to life, and the hall fell silent. The footage was grainy, taken from helmet cameras and orbital drones. The first clips showed an alien armada, Council warships descending upon human colonies, demands for submission, for obedience. Then came the real footage, a massacre, not of humans, of the invaders. The first Council forces that set foot on human soil were met with resistance, as expected. What was not expected was what followed. Cities did not fall. They turned into fortresses. Civilians did not flee. They took up arms. The Council had conquered 1,000 worlds, but they had never faced a species that turned war into an art form. The footage cut to a battlefield. An alien general stood among his troops, a force of thousands. They had the high ground, superior numbers, overwhelming firepower. And then the ground erupted. Human soldiers clad in armor that seemed to drink in the light emerged from the very earth itself. They moved like phantoms, striking from the shadows. Council troops fell in droves, their weapons useless against a force that fought not for conquest, but for vengeance. The screen flickered again. An orbital station, meant to be a staging ground for the invasion, now a smoldering ruin. The remains of a Council dreadnought, split in two, floated lifelessly in the void. Then came the final clip. A Council officer, barely alive, his armor shattered, his eyes wide with terror. A human soldier knelt beside him, speaking into the captured officer's communication device. "Tell them," the soldier said. "Tell them we are coming." The footage ended. The High Chancellor's expression twisted in rage. "This is madness. You dare to threaten the Council?" The human leaned forward, his voice calm, almost amused. "No," he said. "We're past threats. This is a declaration." The hall erupted in chaos. Council members shouted, some calling for war, others urging caution. But the human remained unfazed, standing amid the storm like a force of nature. "You thought we would kneel," he continued, his voice steady. "That we would accept your rule like the others. But you made a mistake." He turned, heading for the exit, but stopped just before the massive doors. "You assumed we were just another species?" He looked over his shoulder, and for the first time, the High Chancellor felt something unfamiliar grip his chest. Fear. The human smiled. "We're not." And with that, he left. The Galactic Council had demanded tribute. Humanity had delivered a reckoning. The doors slammed shut behind the human, leaving the Galactic Council chamber in stunned silence. The High Chancellor, a towering creature with bioluminescent tendrils that pulsed with agitation, turned toward his advisors. "This cannot be allowed," he seethed. "This insult cannot go unanswered." A reptilian council member, her emerald scales shifting under the dim lighting, bared her fangs. "They are dangerous. If we allow this defiance to spread, others may rise against us. We must act swiftly." The High Chancellor's tendrils flickered, considering. The footage had been damning. The humans had fought back harder than expected, harder than any species had before. But the Council had ruled the galaxy for centuries. A single world, no matter how defiant, could not stand against them. "Mobilize the fleet," the Chancellor ordered. "If humanity will not kneel, we will break them." The Council members murmured their approval, already preparing for war. What none of them realized was that they had just made their greatest mistake. The message reached Earth within hours. Humanity had not been waiting idly. They had known the Council would demand submission. They had known that defiance would lead to war. So they prepared. Across the solar system, hidden in the shadows of moons and asteroids, in deep space stations kept secret from prying eyes, humanity had built its arsenal. And now it was time to use it. On Earth, in an underground command bunker beneath the ruins of what had once been Geneva, the leaders of humanity gathered. The room was filled with military officials, scientists, strategists, those who had orchestrated the resistance. The human who had stood before the Council, the one who had delivered the footage, was among them. Admiral Jonas Vark. He stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on the metal surface. His face was unreadable, but his voice carried the weight of humanity's rage. "They're sending everything," he said. "A full-scale invasion force. They think we're going to fight like everyone else did. Desperate, reckless. They think they've already won." A low murmur spread through the room. A general scoffed. "They're in for a hell of a surprise, then." Vark nodded. "We don't just fight wars." He pressed a button on the table, and a holographic display flickered to life. It showed the incoming Council fleet, thousands of warships, carriers, planetary siege weapons. And they don't understand what happens when you push humanity to the edge. The display shifted, revealing Earth's defenses. But it was not just Earth. The entire system was a fortress. Stealth ships, planetary cannons hidden in the crust, cyber warfare stations ready to disrupt enemy communications. But most terrifying of all, humanity's greatest weapon. Project Revenant. A fleet of ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Silent hunters, cloaked in black, designed for one thing: destruction. Each ship was equipped with technology reverse-engineered from captured Council vessels, modified and perfected with human ingenuity. They did not fight fair. They did not need to. Vark's voice was quiet, but it carried through the room like a war drum. They wanted tribute. They wanted submission. His eyes burned with something ancient, something primal. "We'll give them war." Days later, the Galactic Council's fleet arrived in the Sol system, their warships blotting out the stars. They expected a swift victory. They expected humans to break, to surrender. Instead, they found darkness, no transmissions, no visible resistance, just the eerie silence of a trap waiting to be sprung. And then, one by one, their ships began to disappear. The reckoning had begun. The first council ship vanished without a trace. No explosion, no debris. One moment, it was a blip on the fleet's formation. The next, it was gone. Then another, and another. On the command bridge of the Council's flagship, Eternal Dominion, Supreme Admiral Xiphos stood frozen, his mandibles clicking in growing unease. His eyes flicked over the holomap, where entire sections of his fleet were simply disappearing. "Status report," he barked, his voice sharp. A nervous officer, one of the lesser insectoid races under the Council's rule, hesitated. "We don't know, Supreme Admiral. Our ships are vanishing, but there are no energy readings, no weapon signatures." Xiphos bared his fangs. "Impossible. Something is out there." Then the screaming began. Across all frequencies, Council ships were sending distress signals, garbled transmissions, voices shrieking before being cut off. The fleet had arrived expecting planetary defenses, perhaps a desperate resistance force. What they hadn't expected was the cold, merciless precision of human hunters. A cloaked Revenant-class warship, Eclipse 1, slithered through the void like a phantom. Inside, its crew moved with quiet efficiency, watching as their latest target, a massive Council dreadnought, hovered obliviously in the blackness. Captain Elias Carter sat in his command chair, his fingers wrapped around the armrests as he gave the order. Initiate boarding. No railguns, no missiles, no flashy weapons of war. That wasn't the human way. Not anymore. Instead, the dreadnought's sensors flickered for half a second, barely noticeable, and then they were inside. Elite strike teams, clad in silent black armor, materialized within the corridors of the enemy ship, their stealth tech bypassing all security measures. Council officers barely had time to react before human blades found their throats. A squad of insectoid soldiers rushed to arm themselves, but their weapons refused to activate. Their systems had been hacked before they even realized they were under attack. Panic set in. The human soldiers moved like ghosts, like predators. They didn't fight for honor, for territory, or conquest. They fought to eradicate. Within minutes, the dreadnought was under their control. Its own weapons turned against the fleet. Xiphos could only watch in horror as the captured vessel opened fire on its former allies, its rail cannons reducing Council ships to burning wrecks. A deep, unshakable fear coiled in his gut. This was not war. This was a culling. "Pull back," he snarled. "Regroup, we need to—" The bridge lights flickered. The holomap distorted. And then a voice, cold, mechanical, cut through the ship's systems. "Your fleet is compromised. Your fate is sealed." The bridge crew froze. Xiphos's eyes widened. "You are not conquerors." The voice was not synthetic. It was human. "You are prey." And then, from the darkness of space, the true horror revealed itself. Ships that had been cloaked, dozens, hundreds, flickered into view, surrounding the fleet from all sides. Not battleships, not destroyers, predator ships. The Council had come expecting an enemy that would fight in desperation. They had prepared for resistance. They had not prepared for the hunt. Humanity did not fight wars. Humanity ended them. Xiphos barely had time to react before his ship shuddered violently. Explosions rippled across its hull. His crew screamed, alarms blaring, and then, through the chaos, a single transmission came through the main screen. The human from the Council chamber, the one who had warned them. Admiral Jonas Vark. He stared into the camera, unblinking. "You should have taken the tribute." And then the flagship exploded. The Galactic Council had come to make humanity kneel. Now they burned in the cold abyss. The flagship Eternal Dominion ruptured like a dying star, its wreckage scattering into the void. The explosion illuminated the battlefield, casting eerie shadows across the remains of the Council's once mighty fleet. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council had not merely been defeated. It had been hunted. Admiral Jonas Vark stood aboard Eclipse 1, watching the devastation unfold through the viewport. His face was unreadable, but deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The Council had ruled the stars for centuries, crushing any who dared resist. And now, for the first time, they had bled. "Sir," one of his officers called. "Surviving Council ships are attempting to flee." Vark turned to the holo map. He could see the retreat in real time, Council vessels scrambling in panic, their formations breaking apart like frightened cattle. They were running. He exhaled slowly. They still didn't understand. "Do not let them escape," he said. "No survivors." The order was carried out without hesitation. Human ships surged forward, cutting off escape routes, tracking fleeing vessels with ruthless efficiency. One Council cruiser, its engines burning as it attempted to make a hyperspace jump, was suddenly disabled. Its systems shut down in an instant, as if the ship itself had been struck blind. Cyber warfare teams aboard the Eclipse 1 worked in eerie silence, hijacking enemy controls, scrambling navigation systems, turning the Council's own ships against them. A moment later, the cruiser, blinded, powerless, was torn apart by human railguns. Another tried to hide within a debris field, but the moment it entered, a human stealth drone detonated nearby, sending razor-sharp shrapnel ripping through its hull. One by one, the survivors fell. It was not war. It was not a battle. It was an extermination. Vark watched it all unfold, his expression hard as iron. The Council had made a grave mistake when they assumed humanity would beg for mercy. Mercy was no longer in their vocabulary. "Sir," another officer spoke up, "we've captured one of their admirals. The crew resisted, but we managed to take him alive." Vark turned. "Alive?" The officer hesitated. He knew what that meant. Vark sighed. "Put him through." A moment later, the main screen flickered to life. The image of Supreme Admiral Xiphos appeared, his body restrained, his mandibles twitching in what could only be fear. His eyes darted around the human bridge, taking in the silent efficiency of the crew. No celebration, no boasting, only cold, methodical execution. "You ... Xiphos rasped, his voice trembling. "You cannot." "I warned you," Vark interrupted. "I told you what would happen." Xiphos bared his fangs. "The Council will not let this stand. We have ruled the galaxy for millennia. Our wrath—" Vark leaned forward, his voice quiet. "You still don't get it, do you?" Xiphos paused. Vark's next word sent an ice-cold chill through his exoskeleton. "We are the wrath." The transmission cut off. A moment later, Xiphos' ship was reduced to dust. The Council's great invasion force, the fleet that was supposed to shatter humanity, was gone. Not driven back, not defeated, obliterated. But Jonas Vark knew this was far from over. He turned to his officers. "Prepare for the next phase." A few of them hesitated. "Sir, the battle is won." Vark's eyes hardened. "The battle, yes, but we're not here to win battles." A slow, terrible silence spread across the room. "We're here to end the war." Across the stars, hidden deep in Council space, the ruling elites of the galaxy were still unaware of what had just transpired. But soon, they would learn. Humanity was not just fighting back. Humanity was coming for them. Word of the massacre reached the Galactic Council like a phantom whisper. At first, they refused to believe it. Impossible. The idea that an upstart species, a primitive race, could annihilate an entire invasion fleet was absurd. But then the data came in. Transmissions intercepted, scattered distress calls, the chilling realization that no ships had returned. The fleet was gone. High Chancellor Virex stood in the Grand Council chamber, his bioluminescent tendrils dimmed in horror. The room was filled with representatives from 100 star systems, all murmuring in panic. The air vibrated with unease. "They slaughtered our forces," a reptilian delegate hissed. "Our mightiest warships destroyed like nothing." A massive, tusked alien slammed a fist onto the stone table. "We must retaliate. Deploy every ship we have. Wipe them out before they—" He was interrupted by a sudden, chilling sound. The chamber doors creaked open, and a human walked inside. The room fell silent. He was alone, dressed in dark, high-collared military attire. His face was calm, his eyes cold. He moved without fear, without hesitation, until he reached the center of the chamber. It was only then that the council realized the true horror. He had not been announced. The most secure hall in the galaxy. Guards at every entrance. Surveillance that should have detected him the moment he entered the station. Yet here he was, unchallenged, unstopped. "Who?" Virex began, but the human raised a gloved hand. The room fell silent once more. He spoke. "Your fleet is dead." His voice was soft, matter-of-fact. "You came to our system demanding tribute, demanding we kneel." He tilted his head. "We said no." The council remained frozen. "And now," the human continued, "it is your turn to kneel." Virex's tendrils pulsed with barely contained rage. "You dare—" "Yes," the human cut him off. "We dare." He took a slow step forward, and every council member recoiled. "You built an empire on fear," the human said. "You ruled through strength, through terror. You crushed worlds that refused to bow." His voice lowered. "You believed that made you untouchable." He reached into his coat and placed a small metallic device on the table. A hologram flickered to life. The council gasped. Dozens of human ships hovered inside council space. Undetected, unchallenged, they had bypassed every defense, every blockade. They were already here. "You did not just lose a fleet," the human murmured. "You lost the war." Panic erupted. Delegates shouted. Some reached for their communicators, but the human simply stood there, watching them, unimpressed. Virex slammed a fist onto the table. "If you believe we will surrender—" "Surrender," the human smiled. "We don't want your surrender." The room fell deathly still. The smile faded. "We want your extinction." At that moment, the station trembled. Explosions rocked the outer hull. Alarms blared. The council's homeworld, their stronghold, was under attack. The reckoning had arrived. Panic spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council, the undisputed rulers of known space, had never faced an attack on their own world. For centuries, they had sent fleets to crush defiant species, to raise rebellious planets. They were the hunters. Now, they were the hunted. High Chancellor Virex stumbled back from the table, his bioluminescent tendrils flashing erratically in sheer terror. Explosions echoed through the station, distant but growing closer. "How?" he stammered, staring at the human who had walked into their chambers like a phantom. "How did your ships reach us? Our defenses should have—" "You built your empire on the assumption that fear alone was enough to keep you safe," the human said, stepping forward. "You thought you were untouchable because no one dared come for you." He leaned forward, his voice a whisper. "But we are not afraid of you." Another explosion rocked the chamber. Some of the weaker delegates cowered beneath the great stone table, their pride evaporating in an instant. A tusked alien bared his fangs in a desperate attempt to assert dominance. "You don't understand what you've done," he roared. "We are the Council. We control 10,000 worlds. We have fleets that will—" "You had fleets," the human corrected, "and your 10,000 worlds." He placed another device on the table. Holograms flickered to life, showing real-time footage from across the Council's domain. Fires on a dozen planets, orbital bombardments reducing strongholds to dust, entire military stations obliterated before they could even raise their shields. The human gazed at the trembling council members. "Your people are dying. Your worlds are burning." He let the words sink in. "We did not come here to negotiate," he said. "We did not come here to demand tribute or offer terms of surrender." His voice was cold. "We came here to end you." Virex's mind reeled. The Council had ruled for millennia through absolute domination. The mere suggestion of its collapse was unthinkable. And yet, it was happening. Ships burned, empires crumbled. Fear, the same fear they had once instilled in lesser species, now consumed them. The tusked alien snarled and lunged, claws bared. The human barely moved. A single gunshot rang out. The alien's body slumped to the ground, his head a ruined mess of flesh and bone. The human lowered his weapon. "That was for Earth," he murmured. The chamber was silent. The Council, the great rulers of the stars, did not speak. They did not argue. They did not bargain. They only trembled. The human exhaled slowly, almost disappointed. "I expected more from you," he admitted. Then he reached for his communicator. "This is Vark. Execute the final phase." The Council flinched. "Final phase," Virex whispered. Vark stared at him. No survivors. At that moment, the orbital bombardments began. The Galactic Council's homeworld, the heart of their vast dominion, was turned to ash. No mercy, no negotiations. The rulers of the galaxy had demanded tribute. Humanity had delivered extinction. The war was over, and humanity stood alone in the ashes of a fallen empire. The fires of the Galactic Council's homeworld burned for weeks. Humanity did not leave survivors. They did not allow for rebellion. Every remnant of the Council's rule was erased. But Admiral Jonas Vark knew the war was not over. Not yet. The Council's core had been shattered, but its vast empire had been built on more than just its rulers. The war fleets, the noble houses, the planetary governors, many of them were still out there, spread across the stars. Some would fall into chaos, others would seek revenge. Vark stood on the bridge of Eclipse 1, watching as the last Council city collapsed into molten slag below. His face betrayed no emotion. Behind him, Captain Lin's voice broke the silence. "Scattered resistance is forming, sir," she said. "A few Council admirals have managed to regroup in outer systems. We're picking up transmissions. Calls for revenge." Vark sighed. He had expected this. "They still don't understand, do they?" Lin hesitated. "Sir?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We didn't just want to win this war," he said. "We wanted to make sure there would never be another one." She swallowed. "Then what's our next move?" Vark looked back at the burning world beneath them. "Scorched Earth," he said. "Planet by planet, system by system. We don't stop until there is nothing left." Lin stiffened. "Sir, that means billions of—" Vark's gaze darkened. They didn't hesitate to exterminate entire civilizations when they were in power. They ruled through terror. If we leave them anything, even a sliver of a chance to rebuild, they will come back. He took a slow breath. "And I will not let that happen." Lin nodded. She didn't argue. She couldn't. They had all seen too much, lost too much to allow hesitation now. She relayed the orders. Across the fleet, humanity's warships prepared for the next phase. Across the former Council territories, entire planets fell. No treaties, no mercy. Any world that had stood with the Council was reduced to ruin. Any fleet that tried to regroup was annihilated before it could muster strength. Humanity did not just kill its enemies, it erased them. News spread quickly. Some systems surrendered the moment human ships entered their orbit, hoping for mercy. None was given. Others fought desperately, clinging to the old order. They died screaming. And then, something unexpected happened. Worlds that had hated the Council, planets that had lived under its oppressive rule, began celebrating humanity's warpath. To them, the humans were not conquerors. They were liberators. On a dozen planets, revolutions broke out. Formerly enslaved species rose up, inspired by the human example. Some knelt before humanity, begging to join them. Others simply picked up weapons and finished the job. A galaxy that had once been ruled by fear was now drowning in chaos. And Jonas Vark, standing on the bridge of his flagship, watching it all unfold, realized something. The war was over, but something new was beginning. Something far worse. Humanity had shattered an empire. Now they had to decide what came next. Jonas Vark stood in the war room aboard Eclipse 1, staring at the galactic map. The holographic projection flickered, showing red-marked systems, the ones that had been burned, wiped clean of Council control. Yet in the void of destruction, something new was taking shape. The rebels, the revolutionaries, the species that had once cowered under the Council's rule, now rising up in the aftermath. Some worshipped humanity as avengers, as liberators. Others whispered darker fears, that humanity had become the very thing it once fought against. And in the void between stars, remnants of the Council still stirred. "Sir," Captain Lin's voice brought him back. "We have a situation." Vark turned. She tapped a control on the console, and a new transmission appeared. A grainy video feed from a captured distress beacon. At first, only static. Then a face appeared. A Zalari, one of the Council's elite warlords. Vark recognized him immediately. High Admiral Corzin. The alien's face was burned, his left eye swollen shut, blood dripping from his temple. He was slumped against the remains of a bulkhead, the wreckage of his once mighty flagship visible behind him. "To the humans who received this message, I hope you're listening." His voice was hoarse, ragged with pain. "You think you've won. You believe the Council is finished, but you do not understand what you have done." The transmission flickered. In the background, the fires of a dying world cast eerie shadows. "For centuries we ruled by fear. We crushed uprisings before they could take root. We wielded the power of the stars themselves, and we thought we were untouchable." Corzin coughed, a wet and sickening sound. "We were wrong." A long pause. His remaining eye burned with something Vark could not quite place. "You have shown the galaxy what happens when the weak stand up. You have proven that the mighty can fall, and now—" Corzin bared his teeth, a savage grin forming despite his broken face. "Now you have unleashed something far worse than the Council ever was." Vark's jaw tightened. "Look to the stars, humans. You will see it soon enough." The transmission cut out. A heavy silence settled over the war room. Lin exhaled. "What the hell does that mean?" Vark didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing, calculating. Corzin was dying. His fleet was destroyed. His empire lay in ruins. But that message, it wasn't a surrender. It was a warning. The Council had been a tyrannical empire, yes, but it had also been a stabilizing force. It had kept a galaxy full of warring species, feuding warlords, and ancient rivalries under control. Now all that was gone. And something new was coming. Vark turned to the map, watching as fresh conflict zones flickered to life across the stars. He knew what he had to do. "Prepare the fleet," he said. "We're not finished yet." Lin hesitated. "Sir, we've already won." Vark shook his head. "Number, we've only broken the dam." He turned to her, his eyes hard. Now we have to survive the flood. The war for survival had only just begun. The flood came faster than Jonas Vark expected. Within weeks of the Galactic Council's fall, the galaxy erupted into chaos. What was once a tightly controlled empire of fear and order had become a battlefield of ambition and revenge. The old races, those who had lived under the Council's heel for centuries, saw their chance. Some formed new alliances, hoping to replace the Council with their own power. Others sought vengeance, their hatred boiling over into genocidal wars. And then there were the warlords. From the wreckage of the Council's fleets, 100 self-proclaimed rulers rose. Former admirals, governors, and military leaders seized what power they could, carving up the galaxy into war zones. Some fought for survival. Others fought to reclaim the empire humanity had shattered. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy belonged to no one. And that made it more dangerous than ever. On the bridge of Eclipse 1, Vark studied the battle reports. 3 systems had fallen into all-out war. 2 more had declared themselves independent empires. A former council general was massing ships near the Orion Belt. And somewhere, deep in the void, the last of the council's true loyalists were gathering, waiting for the right moment to strike back. "Sir," Lynn said quietly, stepping beside him. "What's our move?" Vark exhaled. Humanity had won the war, but now they faced a choice: leave the galaxy to tear itself apart, or step in and take control. He knew what the generals back on Earth wanted. They wanted to consolidate, fortify, prepare for the eventual counterattack. But Vark had seen what was happening out here. If humanity retreated now, they wouldn't just be leaving behind a war-torn galaxy. They'd be creating something far worse. A galaxy full of species that had seen humanity wipe out an empire. A galaxy filled with leaders who feared them, or hated them. A galaxy that would, eventually, turn its sights back on Earth. Number they couldn't leave. They had to finish this. Vark's voice was steady when he spoke. "We take the throne." Lynn's breath caught. "Sir? We can't afford to let this spiral any further. If we don't step in, someone else will. And that someone might be worse than the Council ever was." He turned, looking at his officers. "We didn't start this war just to run away once the hard part began. If we leave now, humanity will spend the next 100 years looking over its shoulder, waiting for the day the galaxy comes for us." His hands clenched into fists. "We end this. We take control. We don't just destroy the old order. We replace it." Silence. Then Lynn nodded. "Then we'd better start moving before someone else does." Vark turned back to the map. The war wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Humanity would not retreat. It would rule. The transition from conqueror to ruler was never going to be easy. Humanity had won through sheer ruthlessness, through the brutal efficiency of war. But governance? Rule. That was something else entirely. And the galaxy did not sit idle as humanity moved to claim its place. On Eclipse 1, Admiral Jonas Vark met with the commanders of humanity's war fleets. "This isn't sustainable," Admiral Kessler said bluntly. "We can't keep fighting and governing at the same time. Our forces are stretched thin just keeping order." Vark nodded. He knew the truth of it. They had burned worlds, shattered fleets, and driven the Council into extinction. But now they faced a new war, one of diplomacy, logistics, and survival. "Then we adapt," Vark said. "We don't just conquer, we build." The galaxy was already fracturing into chaos. Hundreds of species, planets, and factions were looking for leadership, whether out of fear, desperation, or ambition. Humanity had a choice. They could rule through terror, or they could forge something new. "We have systems begging for stability," Vark continued. "Worlds that hated the Council but have no idea how to govern themselves. We give them a choice: join us, or burn in the chaos." Silence. Then Kessler smirked. "So we do become an empire." Vark's expression didn't change. We become the solution. The Council ruled through fear alone. We will rule through order. Lynn folded her arms. And those who refuse? Vark's gaze darkened. Then they choose war. Across the shattered remains of the old Galactic Council, the message went out. Humanity was not abandoning the galaxy. It was taking it. They sent fleets to stabilize key trade routes. They installed new planetary governors, some human, some chosen from the local populations, but all loyal. They crushed the worst warlords before they could rise. And one by one, systems fell in line. Some out of gratitude, some out of fear, and some because they saw the truth. Humanity had changed the rules, but there were still enemies lurking in the dark. On the outer rim, in the ruins of an abandoned council stronghold, a meeting took place. Warlords, rebel admirals, and ex-council leaders gathered in secret, and at the head of the table sat High Admiral Corzin, the last surviving war leader of the old order. He had escaped humanity's purge, fleeing into the void, and now he had a plan. Humanity has made its choice, he said, his voice a low growl. They seek to rule, but we will not kneel. He looked at the gathered warlords, his eyes burning with rage. We were the rulers of this galaxy for 1,000 years. We will not be cast aside by a race of upstart primates. The warlords growled in agreement. Corzin leaned forward. It is time to remind the humans why the Council ruled for so long. A savage grin spread across his face. It is time to bring them war. The war for humanity's empire had begun. Aboard Eclipse 1, Jonas Vark prepared for the inevitable. Reports flooded in. Corzin's forces were amassing near the Veil Nebula, a treacherous region of space littered with black holes and ion storms. It was a natural fortress, a place where conventional fleets would falter. But Vark had built humanity's arsenal for more than conventional war. We don't fight on their terms, he told his assembled officers. They expect us to charge in, to meet them head-on like the Council did with every foe. That's not our way. Captain Lynn raised an eyebrow. What's the plan, then? Vark pointed to the holographic map, zooming in on the nebula. We use their strength against them. The Veil's chaos is their shield, but it can be their tomb. He outlined the strategy. Stealth ships would infiltrate the nebula, seeding it with drones programmed to destabilize the region's already volatile energy fields. When Corzin's fleet engaged, humanity would turn the environment into a weapon. Black holes would shift, storms would intensify, and the rebellion would be swallowed by the very fortress they'd chosen. The officers nodded grimly. It was ruthless, it was brilliant, it was human. Corzin, meanwhile, stood aboard his patched-together flagship, Vindicator, gazing out at his ragtag armada. Warships from a dozen species flanked him, scarred vessels from the Council's fall, refitted pirate raiders, and stolen prototypes. His forces were outnumbered, outgunned, but he had something humanity lacked: desperation. They think they've won, he growled to his lieutenants. They think they can erase us and take our place. But this galaxy was ours long before they crawled out of their dirt. He turned to the tactical display. We strike first. Hit their outer colonies. Draw them into the Veil. Once they're inside, we crush them. The warlords cheered, their voices a cacophony of defiance. Corzin's plan was simple but brutal. Lure humanity into a trap, then bury them in the nebula's jaws. He didn't need to conquer the galaxy again. He only needed to prove humanity could bleed. The war began with fire. Corzin's forces struck human-held systems on the rim, burning colonies and supply lines. Vark responded as predicted, deploying his fleets, but not recklessly. While Corzin ravaged the outskirts, Eclipse 1 and its shadow fleet slipped into the Veil Nebula undetected. Days later, the trap was sprung. Corzin's armada, emboldened by early victories, pursued what they thought was a retreating human force into the nebula. The ion storms roared, masking their sensors, and the black holes loomed like silent predators. Corzin stood on his bridge, tasting victory. Then the drones activated. Energy pulses rippled through the nebula, triggering chain reactions. Black holes shifted orbits, dragging ships into their maws. Ion storms surged, frying electronics and turning vessels into drifting husks. Corzin's fleet scrambled, but there was no escape. From the shadows, humanity struck. Revenant-class ships decloaked, their precision strikes tearing through the chaos. Corzin's Vindicator held its ground, cannons blazing, but it was a lone titan against an unrelenting swarm. Vark's voice crackled over the comms, a final message for the dying warlord. You ruled through fear. We rule through inevitability. The Vindicator's hull buckled under a barrage of railgun fire, and with a blinding flash, it was gone. Corzin's rebellion died with him, swallowed by the nebula's fury. The galaxy watched in awe and terror as humanity emerged victorious once more. The Veil Nebula became a graveyard, a monument to the cost of defiance. Word spread, the humans did not just win wars, they ended them. Vark returned to Earth, not as a conqueror, but as a builder. Humanity's empire took shape, not as a mirror of the Council's tyranny, but as something new. Systems joined willingly, drawn by the promise of stability in a galaxy weary of chaos. Former enemies became allies, their hatred replaced by pragmatism. But Vark never forgot Corzin's warning. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had proven the mighty could fall, and in doing so they had planted seeds of rebellion that might one day grow. He stood on a balcony overlooking New Geneva, rebuilt from the ashes, and wondered what challenges lay beyond the horizon. For now, humanity ruled. Not through fear, not through tribute, but through the unrelenting will to survive. The war was over,